I think it's really important to sort of think about that the situation is not who has the best bike plan, who has the biggest bank account to fund the work, who's building the most innovative types of infrastructure, who has the best engagement strategy. Like all of that, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter, we found. It's really about how well do these groups know what's going on? How well are they able to support each other? And are they working together towards that common goal?
I would just add like an example is one city where we had pretty supportive staff and we had community engagement, and the mayor was kind of meh, like she wasn't against it, but wasn't really for it. And we were able to really get her on board because the other two the city staff were able to kind of bolster them. And then we were able to really get those community organizations, individuals out and support to give her 100% props every time she came out for an activation event. And it became, in 2 years, a difference from her being kind of like, it's fine, to actively running a re-election campaign, as this is part of it, her support for their accelerated goal.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Zoe Kirkos and Kyle Wagenschutz from CityThread. We're going to be getting an update from the CityThread organization and announcing their 3 new cities in the new cohort of folks that they have been helping out with technical assistance to try to accelerate their mobility plans and get things out on the ground. But before we do that, just want to say, if you are enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Super easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page. There's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons do get early and ad-free access to all the video content. Okay, let's get right to it with Zoe and Kyle. Hey guys, welcome to the Active Towns channel.
Hey John, nice to be here.
John, are we the guests that have been on the show the most?
No, you are not. You are not.
What place are we? I feel like I need to know what the number is so we can get up
there. I think you're probably tied for Professor Peter Norton. The University of Virginia. Author of the book Fighting Traffic. I think you're tied there, but I think Ryan Van Duzer's probably been on the channel the most number of times.
Oh, that's I was thinking it was Duzer. Yeah.
Shout out to Duzer. Folks, yes, you have been on. Welcome once again. It's such a joy having you. But I'm sure there's people out in the audience who don't know the heck you are. So, Zoe, why don't you start us out? Who the heck is Zoe?
Thanks, John. I'm Zoe Kirkos. I'm one of 3 partners at CityThread. As an organization, we're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, but I am coming to you from Boulder and have a background in working, delivering money for bicycle infrastructure projects, managing youth cycling programs, helping increase equity and shared micromobility, and just working with folks in the bicycling pedestrian world across the U.S. So really happy to be here as a partner at CityThread.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, from my adopted hometown of Boulder, Colorado, where I used to live, but I want to visit as much as I can. Kyle, how about you?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Kyle Wagenschutz. I join Zoe and our other partner, Sarah Studdard, at CityThread. I'm a recovering bureaucrat. Spent a lot of time working in local and regional government, worked at a national nonprofit after that, and just trying to make the world a better place with a little less red tape.
Yeah. You mentioned you're a recovering bureaucrat. You spent some time working for the city in Memphis, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, almost spent 7 years there in what feels like a really long time ago. But while I was there, my job was to launch the city's first bicycle and pedestrian program.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, Memphis is the common denominator with your other partner, Sarah. She was there in Memphis as well. So
yeah, best city in the whole country. I put the roots down there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, and we're here to
John, I just want to say I met Kyle when he helped me organize a bike day, a mobility workshop in Memphis many years ago. How long ago? That was a long time ago, Kyle, like 14 years ago, something like that.
Before I had children.
Yeah.
You had a lot of more free time.
Yeah.
And we showed off the great infrastructure that Kyle helped build there.
Yeah. And while Memphis is a tremendous city, it's no surprise that you all did migrate to the Boulder, Denver area. You, Kyle and Sarah, and Zoe, you've been in Boulder forever and ever and ever. So, there's an attractor that brings people in. We're here to talk about and get an update on CityThread. So let's pull up your website here and chat a little bit about this. So for folks who are tuning in for the very first time to hear from you, who the heck is CityThread? What is it that you all do?
So CityThread is a nonprofit organization. We work with cities and their community partners to help them deliver public infrastructure projects faster and better. So we're really built our approach around the idea that cities can move faster and that the bureaucracy has a role to play in terms of making sure that all voices are heard and making sure that we're attending to the needs of the many and not just serving the interests of a few. But sometimes that bureaucracy and red tape can really get in the way of a city being able to effectively deliver the projects and the programs that residents want and need. So CityThread's approach is designed to kind of cut through that through an approach that we've developed over a number of years in working with 17 plus cities across the U.S. And we're excited to be working with a number of cities to help them do just that, deliver projects better, faster, with more community input, being more responsive to community needs, and especially in this day and age, kind of rebuilding trust between residents and their city government that cities can work for them and help them, thrive.
Yeah. What would you add, Kyle?
I'd say, we were talking about sort of our history of working in Memphis and delivering infrastructure projects there. And so our approach is really born out of personal experience of going through the motions of attempting to get great infrastructure projects on the ground and just feeling sort of like the morass and the slog that it could sometimes take. We have a funny story that our other partner, Sarah, and I first met in 2010. I was working for the city. She was working for a community group. We were partnering on an infrastructure project, and that infrastructure project was heralded by the community. The community raised nearly $100,000 to help do some of the initial design and planning work. It was all this sort of, we got a federal grant to fund the construction of it. It was one of the most, I think, positive working relationships I ever had as a city official, of working with the community group to see this thing happen that the community wanted, that business owners wanted. And I had 2 kids, a full career at the city of Memphis, moved to Colorado. Sarah then moved to Colorado, and then it was finally built almost 10 years later, right? And you just sort of like think to yourself, like, why in the world did this project that seemingly, like on paper, checked all of the boxes? No vocal opposition, the funding was in place, everyone wanted to see it happen, enthusiastic people and working every single day. And that for us was really the impetus for the work that we do at CityThread, to say, like, what are the real challenges that communities have at delivering infrastructure projects? If in the best scenario, it takes us 10 years to change the way a road works, we're always just going to be losing to the battle of time. And for us, we asked ourselves and asked city partners to say, like, does it have to take this long? Like, what are the real things that are really slowing us down? And our playbook, the CityThread Accelerated Mobility Playbook, is really sort of, the lessons that we've learned of working in communities, helping them accelerate transportation projects, and identifying some of the key factors that are really slowing things down, but are also really manageable and easily fixable if we're just sort of take the time and attention to do it.
Fascinating. Yeah, I just had Greg Spots, the former director of transportation for the city of Seattle, on, and we were talking about, really why he was hired. He was brought in to try to accelerate programs and get some of these active mobility programs off of the docket. They've been, sort of stymied and stuck in there. And we talked a little bit about, you can only move as fast as the speed of trust. That's an oversimplification of it, but I get the sense, having worked with you both over the years with this type of implementation of this program, that's a big cornerstone of what you're working on. Is it an oversimplification of it?
I'd say it's 100% true. It's easy to say, and I don't say it's hard to do, but you have to be willing to invest the time and energy and, resources in order to make it happen. You build trust, and it sounds like very direct and easy of like, oh, you build trust, let's go out and build trust. And that's a lot of actual activities, right? It's a lot of talking to each other. It's continually reaching out and engaging new and diverse organizations. It's also telling people, I'm not just going to come in and deliver something and listen to you while I'm delivering it, but I'm actually going to engage you in the whole process of deciding what's going to be delivered and how it's going to be delivered and how we're going to keep you engaged all along the way, how we're going to share information, and being really clear and consistent around how we are participating with you in delivering projects that are going to be affecting your community. So it's 100% true, easy to say, but takes some time. I don't think it's hard so much, but when we are feeling under the gun to deliver in a certain way and to be responsive to, elected leaders and other, powerful partners, we also need to just really, keep focused on being consistent and predictable and ongoing in our engagement with all those local community-based organizations, anchor institutions, faith-based organizations, neighborhood groups that are the ones that are actually living with the results of what you're building on the ground and want to have a say in what that looks like. And so I think the mistake a lot of folks make is thinking that it can happen quickly and that once you do it, then you're all set to go, whereas it's an ongoing partnership. I always compare it to like, I have friends across the country. I don't just say, well, we became friends 20 years ago and now we're good, right? I mean, we have to steward that relationship. It's the same in a community. You have to steward it. You have to take care of it and you have to continually reinvest in it.
Yeah, well said. And it occurs to me too, while you were saying that, Zoe, that moving at the speed of trust is sort of different with every different city, and maybe even every community and neighborhood, because there could be something that they need that's a little different than, say, the neighborhood, across town. And so it may be a different mix of integration, interventions, engagement that needs to take place to really make sure that you're, sort of hitting the key factors that you need to hit from the standpoint of being able to move quickly. You need to make sure that you are really listening to the audience. What would you add to that, Kyle, in terms of, that challenge of being able to move and accelerate and move a little bit quicker?
I would add that even if you aren't proactively engaged in sort of like trust building work in communities, cities are building trust in expectations every single day. And so it's not that trust doesn't exist. It's so that trust might exist in something that is negative. Like I might trust the city to never follow through on the feedback that I provided at this public meeting. I might trust the city to never mow this vacant lot that I've been complaining about for the last 12 months. Like, trust, we oftentimes talk about trust with a positive sentiment, like trust is a good thing, but to recognize that people do trust their government and they do trust their city, but it's oftentimes in the opposite direction of where we want it to be. They're trusting in the failure, the incompetency, the slowness, the inability to meet their needs. And that's really the situation that we're trying to reverse. And so when Zoe's talking about sort of like the work that goes into and the nurturing of building trust. We're actually not starting from sort of like a 0 point. There's no neutrality here. We're oftentimes starting behind the 8 ball. And John, to your point about how that's different community to community, some neighborhoods, some cities, some groups of people are so far in the negative side of this sort of like this trust is so tainted by past historical experiences, maybe past, generationally. We might still be thinking about the ways in which the city didn't do this thing 30 or 40 years ago. That's the starting point that we're sort of talking about nurturing cities, nurturing those relationships and trust. The only way you do that, and I think, what we sort of like try to help cities sort of understand is that you don't go from that negative position in trust to, so you don't flip the paddles in the other direction because you have like one big project or one sort of a monumental moonshot. You build trust like one step at a time, right? And it's simply by the repetition of saying, I'm going to do this, and then actually doing it. And then you say, well, after I did that one, now here's the next thing I'm going to do. And then you actually follow through on that. You have to do that over and over and over again in hopes that, right, you just get back to a neutral place. Like, let's not promise anything big. Let's just say, trust building could be as simple as, I'm going to commit to fixing this broken sidewalk in front of the school that you all have been complaining about for the last 12 months. And then going and actually fixing the broken sidewalk. And the results will speak for themselves. They'll think, oh, wow, this person who told me they were going to fix it did fix it. So when that person comes back and says, okay, I hear you, we're going to fix, the missing stop signs, or we're going to do these other kinds of interventions. You just have to continually do that over and over and over again. The reason that's so hard is that the systems, the funding streams, the policies and the paperwork that sort of get sort of blurred into transportation projects make that repetition really, really hard. It can draw the timelines way out. And so you might be doing a great job, but then if you disappear for 6 months or 12 months, you might have done a great public meeting to get some design feedback. But if your design takes 3 to 12 months to actually produce, and then you're back in front of the people almost a year later, no one's like, well, who's this person? It's like, I barely remember they were here a year ago talking about something. And so it's about sort of like, building sort of, the kinds of feedback and communication loops that are sort of constantly sort of feeding, to Zoe's metaphor, nurturing those relationships, calling people, letting them know what's going on, being transparent about where we are. Maybe it does take 12 months to do a design, but at the end of the day, how are we going to communicate to people while that's actually happening in a way that continues to involve them? What can I do to build trust during that period of time? How can we sort of, begin to sort of think about this work not just being a procedure of paperwork, but a procedure of building relationships and communication streams with people?
And I clicked on the Our Approach button that you guys have on your website here, and it activates this page. And it really gets to the heart of what you're talking about, is that the people in the communities, in the neighborhoods, in the city, they know best, what they need, for their neighborhood, their community, their area. And so talk a little bit about, how you approach that in terms of engaging these representatives, these partnerships, these communities?
Well, we start from the position of building a broad and diverse coalition of support for the work that the city wants to do, and supporting the city first and foremost in being bold and ambitious and setting a clear and measurable goal that's within the time frame that people can actually understand and see. So, a goal that says, and this is frequent in a bicycle pedestrian plan, in 20 years, we'll have this, and I would, in my community, be like, 20 years? I don't even know if I'm going to be alive in 20. I don't know if I'm going to live here. My kids will be grown. They will have their own children. Like, 20 years is a really long timeline, and you're going to lose a lot of people. If you say, this is what I'm going to build in 2 years or in 3 years, then people are like, oh, I'm actually going to see movement about that. That's actually going to measurably improve my life if I got this underpass, in 2 years that would connect me from where I live to my job, that I can wait for, So it's setting that goal that is ambitious, but also measurable, and being really clear about what it is. And for us, when we work with cities, we're also often like identifying it as a mileage goal. Like, we're going to build 30 miles, we're going to build 50 miles by this point. And then building a broad coalition of support around it. And I think this is a really key piece that Kyle kind of gestured to earlier, but I think is important to reinforce, is that when we're bringing new groups in, we're not asking them to give up whatever it is that they work on or that they prioritize or think is important. I was actually just on a call with a city that we're working in with a new coalition member who's like, yeah, I'm excited to be part of this coalition. We're 100% on board. What are you going to need, from me? Because I have all this other stuff. And I'm like, that I work on every day. And I was like, you do the things you do. And then we're going to let you know how you can come out in support of the city working towards this goal that they are stating, and see what makes sense within the context of your work and your priorities. Are you trying to help people get to their jobs? Okay, then you can connect this goal to helping people get to their jobs. Are you trying to improve air quality in your community? Well, then you can connect this to that work. Are you trying to get, kids to be able to ride and bike to school? Okay, you can connect this to your work. We're not asking you to give up what you do. Like, you do your day job, you go and 100% work on that, and then recognize that mobility affects your ability to do your job and we all move. So it affects how people can get to work or get to the things that, get to products and services, feel safe and comfortable on the street. And so we're saying this is an opportunity for you to come together around the city achieving those things. And you don't have to give up what you do every day. You just have to say, this goal is important to me, so I'm going to sign my name to that. And then hopefully we can bring you out for when the city is celebrating the grand opening of a new stretch of trail or a new protected intersection. You'll come out and say, yeah, I'll come celebrate that because that's important to me too, in addition to all those things I work on every day.
Yeah. And we see on page here on screen, the beliefs that drive our work and also the outcomes that make it all worthwhile that you're working on. You mentioned there's always, quite a few things in terms of like acknowledging that, these are the types of mobility features that, everybody can benefit from. And we're looking here now at the outcomes of what you're trying to achieve from all of this. One of the things that has, sort of bubbled up within the last few weeks is, all the turmoil that's coming down from the federal government and all of that. And how do we deliver, these types of services without this being some sort of a cultural war, type of hot button issue? Because I know that you're working with a variety of different cities, and we'll get to the whole list of who you've worked with in the past in a little bit. But talk a little bit about the fact that a big part of the framing and the acceleration, and I'll have you address this, Kyle, because it dates back to even the final mile. Talk a little bit about the framing of how you deliver some of these outcomes that stretch across political realms and is not a right versus a left issue.
Yeah, there's probably an opportunity here, Joan, to link back to some of the older Active Towns podcasts where we really dive into this. But, we don't work in communities that don't already want this kind of infrastructure and these kinds of projects to actually occur. And we've never walked into a community where we found that they didn't want them. So it's like we always keep this little piece in the back of our mind of like, well, maybe this is the city where the public doesn't want safe infrastructure, and they don't want slower streets, and they don't want bicycle lanes, and they don't want trails to parks. We haven't found that city yet, and we've been doing this a long time in a lot of places. In fact, I'm continually shocked by how supportive people actually are of this kind of infrastructure. It's shocked because it's not consistent with the public narrative around sort of these kinds of projects. It's not consistent with the perceptions that we hear from elected officials. It's not consistent with sort of like the general, ethos that people just like love to protest bicycle lanes and the kind of sort of like stories that we've built around this work doesn't actually match with when we do voter polling for like, do you want to live on a street that has speed humps or bicycle lanes or sidewalks or traffic? However we word the question, we're finding massive support in every kind of city that we're in. Big cities, small cities, rural towns. Like that support is really intense and really concentrated in a lot of ways. And, as you sort of like mentioned this, is like it cuts across political ideology, it cuts across socioeconomic, racial and ethnic identities. It cuts across all of the demographics in a way that actually makes our job easy in some sense. We don't have to try to sort of carve out a message or a tactic that is unique to a group and then sort of link a different group with these. We actually have the ability here in this country to sort of, approach this work through a slightly different lens than we traditionally have, and build support for building this work from a constituency that we don't even know exists in a lot of ways. And so oftentimes, the example here is like in cities, who loves this stuff, right? Who supports this infrastructure? It's people who ride bicycles. It's your local mobility advocacy group. It's sort of transit advocates. Like there's a whole cast of characters that we know are going to show up and say, we want this infrastructure because we understand its value. There's a whole other cast of characters who we know are always going to show up and oppose it, right? And that's different in different cities. It's motivated by different things, but guaranteed, if you walked into any city hall today and you said, hey, who's showing up to the public meeting to oppose whatever it is on tonight's agenda, they will give you a couple names of people who are there every single time. In the middle of that is a huge swath of people who don't wake up every day and say, you know what, I really want to thank the mayor for supporting fixing sidewalks today. Or there's a huge swath of people who don't wake up every day and say, you know what, the city did do a good job with that construction project. There's a group of people for whom that is not a thought that crosses their mind. They generally, in huge numbers, support this kind of active infrastructure, active transportation, infrastructure, recreation projects going in their community. But they have no motivation, no way in to sort of sort of voicing that support, and frankly aren't really motivated or interested in actually doing it. And so for us, that's the real opportunity that we have in American cities, is that we have this untapped group of supporters, and all we have to do is create a pathway for their support to be the loudest voice in the room, for that support that already exists. I don't have to convince somebody that walking to school is great for kids. I don't have to convince people that bicycling is good for your health and for your neighborhood. What we have to do is create pathways and mechanisms that are really, really easy for their support to make it to the ears of decision makers, to make their support stand in contrast to the people who are going to be opposing that.
Kyle, on this next question, I'll stick with you. We'll sort of wrap up this concept of accelerating the implementation of these programs. Does it get easier? Does it get faster within a city? Or since we acknowledged at the forefront that every neighborhood is its own unique little challenge, do you still have to go through the steps?
It's a snowball, John, right? And you get stand at the top of the hill and you pack your snow into a tight little ball and you start rolling it down the hill. Acceleration begins as soon as that snowball is rolling down the hill. But if you were to stop it just a couple of feet in, you would have just a slightly bigger snowball. The trick here is to sustain that kind of momentum over a period of time until that snowball is so big that you can't stop the acceleration, right? The limit you eventually wind up with is, do we have enough people to actually deliver all of the projects that we have queued up and are, that people actually support? That's a whole different concept and sort of, problem for cities to actually challenge. But by thinking about acceleration, not as I'm going from 0 to 60 in 20 seconds, it's like I'm going from 0 to 60 in the course of like the next 12 months. Right. And so for me to get to 60 in the next 12 months, I first have to get to 10 miles per hour in the first 3 months. And then after that, I get to, I sort of like exponentially build on itself. And so in all of the cities that we've ever worked in, and, we'll talk about sort of, cities sort of thinking about, their how many miles they can build in a certain period of time. Not a single one of them had just went from what their current pace of development or the project delivery was to their accelerated pace overnight. It is a process that you slowly have to ramp up and you slowly build. But once you get to sort of like that next level, the next one becomes a little bit easier, a little bit easier after that, and it builds on itself. The reason this has failed historically in cities in the past, because we can find pockets of time. We could probably do a whole podcast of episodes of places that had the right mix of things at the right time, and they did like a sprint, right? And you're like, cool, look what they did in this really short period of time. And then, the mayor left, or the funding ended, or the advocacy group changed leadership, or this happened or that happened. In any one of those sort of like charismatic leadership models that sort of can drive progress in a short period of time, they don't sustain themselves because they haven't built sort of the repetitions. And coming back to sort of like building trust and building repetitions is the same for acceleration. And so the opportunity and like where sort of City Thread has really planted a flag in terms of understanding how to build acceleration is on the nurturing and the sustaining of this momentum so that you do reach those end goals way faster than you thought you would.
So Zoe, it seems like, based on this analogy of like the snowball of momentum and acceleration that's starting to happen, that a critical point to this is that the communities themselves start sending the message out that, oh, that's cool that they got over there. We want that too. Is that a big part of it?
I would say that, for sure, the messaging, like how you're talking about it and who the messenger is super important. And also for the city to, create goals and project lists that actually benefit everybody in the community, that are not just reaching a certain neighborhood or part of the city that has maybe been, overinvested in over time, but is really, trying to reach everybody throughout the city. And ensuring that you're talking consistently to folks, you're engaging new ones. And as I said, making sure that messenger is engaged, that you're, engaging a whole bunch of messengers who are speaking differently about the work to different folks is super important, because like I can go in and talk to folks in a city all I want, and they're going to be like, well, who's that lady, and how does she know what I need or what my life is like? If I am able to bring her neighborhood walking group into the mix, am I able to engage like her neighbor who, maybe rides her bike to school with her kids every day, and that person talks to, the lady down the street, then you're starting to get some momentum, and then you're starting to engage people. So, the biggest joy of my life is to go to meetings in a city. Like I was at a kind of basically a chamber meeting, and I was sitting at this round table, right? And somebody at the round, we were having kind of table discussion. And so somebody said, well, what is the city doing about this? And I felt like I had to answer, but then another person answered and said, no, it's not that. It's actually the city's trying to do this. And it was like they took my talking points and it came out of this other guy's mouth. And I was like, okay, my work is done here. Like I don't have to say anything. I can just eat my salad and listen nicely to everything else that was happening. So that's a really key piece. But I also think, to Kyle's point, as you build momentum and people see what's happening, people are kind of like, well, I want that too. I think that is true, that people start to say, well, that school neighborhood, kids are walking and biking there and they seem to be having a really good time. And, the kids are active, and that word spreads in a community. And so other people, start to go, well, I thought I didn't want this because it meant a certain thing for me, but now I'm seeing the effects, and that's the best message that you can have in support of infrastructure. And Kyle says this a lot, is when you build something really great, it's a billboard for the city doing something really good. And it's there, for a long time, of the city doing something really good that other people want. If you do it badly, then it's a billboard for the city doing something not very good that people don't want. So that's going to be your message.
Yeah. Well, we teased out a little bit that we have a new cohort coming up. So let's pop on over to the visual here. The drum roll, boom, 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 boom. There we go. It's Burlingame, California, Hood River, Oregon, and Columbus, Ohio. So this is the new cohort of cities. Kyle, walk us through what will this new cohort of cities get as part of the City Thread, AMP package?
Yeah, so this is our cohort for our Accelerated Mobility Playbook Technical Assistance Grant. It's an annual competitive grant process that cities and a community partner join in collaboration to write an application to City Thread. And they basically describe like, hey, here's the momentum that we're actually building. We have support in these areas. We have this great new bicycle plan or a mobility plan. We want to accomplish these things. We think we have all of the right pieces together, but we're not quite sure what the first step actually take is, right? It's to come back to the snowball metaphor. We're not sure what the first 10 feet of our snowball actually sort of look like. And so we select cities every year to join our growing list of cities. And as a part of that technical assistance, we perform an assessment of the current momentum, like where's the momentum building? How can you capitalize on the successes that you're already having? But also, how can we take a sort of a forecast of the future and look at the challenges that we know you're going to experience? And we know you're going to experience them because almost every city experiences some form of the same challenge. And so we do a deep dive with people there locally through tons of interviews, by visiting with the city, by looking through all of their planning documents. Zoe and I have even been known to watch recorded city council meetings for hours at a time to sort of get a gist of how public discourse is actually happening. Sarah gets on social media and doom scrolls all of the comment sections to find out what's happening in a community. Those are the least glamorous parts of the job. But that really helps us understand, wow, you do have all this really great momentum. Here's where we can predict with some level of accuracy, because we've been in your shoes before, where the pitfalls are going to exist. And what we help them actually do is identify the severity of those potential pitfalls and then create an action plan for them to avoid them, right? It's like, you don't have to fall into this trap if you don't want to. And we have 3, 10, 20 different strategies for you to totally avoid that. And it doesn't matter if you are a small city like Hood River, Oregon, which is a delightful, small town outside of Portland that has lots of wonderful recreational, assets and amenities there. But is a small rural town in America, or if you're Columbus, Ohio, on the other end of that spectrum, right? A growing urban area that is growing in population every single day and is dealing with the stresses of having more people move to their city than their infrastructure can actually handle. And so that, for us, at the end of this process, we hope that the cities are able to walk away with really clear steps for how they can begin to sort of take the first steps towards avoiding the pitfalls, how they can sustain that momentum for 2 to 3 years after that process. And then at the end of it, we bring all of our cohort together, our city partners, our community partners. We bring them together in a room and we help provide some training for some of the real tactical sort of elements of that action plan. Because some of the things that we recommend, things like coalition building, communications, we've sort of have hinted at those. Those are not necessarily the kinds of actions that cities know how to take, or they have had some limited experience and they're not quite sure how to be successful with those kinds of actions. And so we incentivize sort of, through not just by providing sort of like, the action plan, say, hey, you need to do better messaging. We then sort of say like, hey, come join us for a couple of days and we're going to teach you why better messaging is important, how to do it, how to think about your own work in different ways.
Zoe, what has you excited about this new cohort?
I think it's a really nice variety of cities. As Kyle said, we have Burlingame, which is a suburb of San Francisco, although someone from the Bay Area told me I shouldn't call it that, but I guess that's how I identify it. Hood River, which is a smaller community, but that gets a huge influx of tourists, during their high season. So, triples, quadruples in size, population wise during their high season, but is a rural, small community. And then, as Kyle said, Columbus, which is a growing urban area. I didn't actually realize how big Columbus is. It's about 1 million people in their city. So, having that range so that we can see that some of the issues that we identify and the recommendations that we make, while they might vary somewhat, cities are pretty much dealing with similar issues. We joke that not enough money is the free square on the bingo card. Every city will tell us that they don't have enough money, and we're like, yes, welcome to the club. It's a very large one, and that's not the excuse anymore. So you can still move quickly, and we've seen cities that even have plenty of money not move because they don't have the strategy that actually helps them do that. So we're excited to see, because people are always asking, well, have you worked rural? Have you worked in any rural communities? And we have, but here's a nice cohort that kind of demonstrates 3 different city types.
Yeah. Is Hood River the smallest city you've ever worked with?
It will be. Yep. The smallest city that we've worked with. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And with that in mind, let's pull up the list of the other cities. So this is from the press release that just went out announcing the new cohort. And we see that, we've got, a wide variety. Oh, Bainbridge Island, Washington. That's pretty small, too.
That's about 25,000 people. So they were our smallest before Hood River.
Before Hood River, yeah. Okay, and we've got Austin, Texas, obviously. I believe we're now the 11th largest city in the nation. I think Jacksonville knocked us off of the number 10 spot. So
I'm so sorry, John. That must be hard.
That's all right. It all works. But there's a good variety of different types of cities. Geographically, we've got Providence, Rhode Island, all the way out to Tucson, Arizona. When you look at this list and you reflect about this experience, what are some of the things that come to mind, Kyle, of these years, the years of experience of working with these cities and dating back all the way to the time when you first started working with Austin back in 2016, 2017, what are some of the things that bubble up and are most salient in your mind in terms of reflections?
My first entry point into mobility advocacy was working in a community bike shop in Memphis, Tennessee, where we took in donated bicycles and helped people fix them back up, like a recycle a bike program. They exist in a lot of cities. I was always shocked. It always sort of it was astonishing after years of being in the recycle a bike business of just how many bicycles are actually out there, right? When I never got to a point where I was like, well, I'm not sure if there's any more bicycles to be donated to this shop. And I find that same correlation to sort of the level of interest and need in communities about thinking about how to develop their cities in different ways. There has never been a period of time where we have sort of thought to ourselves like, well, the job's done. There's no more cities interested in building this infrastructure. I think in some ways it's just the opposite, right? The interest in sort of safe streets for people, in whatever form that actually takes, is higher than it's ever actually been. And the need for communities, for our leaders, I think there's a whole generation of young leaders moving into working as elected officials, as city staff members, new generations of advocates and community members coming together, that the interest is an all-time high. I think the diversity of cities in our list that we're sort of working with, if we look at other partner organizations about where their interest is bubbling up, it's not just in New York, it's not just in San Francisco, it's not just sort of like the places that we have always talked about and always sort of built these case studies on. It's actually nationwide, and there's a big need for cities out there. And so that's the first thing. The second thing that I think about is that City Thread's work is only possible because we have a shared set of challenges and opportunities in American cities. Like if we were attempting to do this on a case-by-case basis under the guise that every city is different, it needs its own custom plan, like there's no way that what works in one city works in another city. If that was the case, we would not be in existence. It would just be too hard to actually do. And so there's this recognition that we can work in Hood River, Oregon, with a similar set of tactics, a similar set of strategies, a similar playbook, in the same way that we might go to Columbus, Ohio, and offer the same kinds of things. Now, the circumstances are radically different. The context is radically different. Why things happen, who moves them, all of those things are different. But underlying this is this sort of like this baseline, this foundational approach that actually is built on the sense that we're actually way more alike than we are actually different. And it doesn't matter, if you're a red city or a blue city, or if you're rural or if you're urban, there's a core set of values that we share. And I think that's important for the success of our mobility programs. It's important for us to sort of think about holistically as a country in terms of the turmoil that's happening, the uncertainty around sort of, funding and programs and government. And what does it all mean? I think it's fundamental to listen and to sort of like sit with an understanding that there's actually way more in common than separates us. And that's what actually makes all of this possible. It's what is going to make progress actually possible, not just for mobility, but for all of the other issues that our communities face.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to jump in and say, because you just were showing a few stills from our leadership gathering almost 2 years ago in Denver, and then the video that you had playing was for our leadership gathering in Milwaukee. And those are events where we actually bring together the city and community lead from the cohort of cities that we're working with. And I think, to Kyle's point, like, that's why people love these gatherings, because they're talking with peers and they can actually share their own challenges and issues. And but I have this guy that's always, complaining, and everybody else is like, oh, we have that guy here too, and they can kind of connect around how they have this shared experience of whether it's a person in elected leadership, or it's a person on staff somewhere, or it's a person in the community. And also, we're struggling with this kind of communications challenge, and then others can kind of come in with their shared experience around that, and we can talk about that as a group. So I think everybody is a special snowflake, and I don't want to say that every city is alike, but we all are facing kind of similar challenges. And the beauty of that is not only that we can help with that, but city and community leads can help each other with that.
And I think that one of the most important aspects of your approach and how you engage the community groups that are out there is that that's part of the customization that does end up taking place, is because you're taking the time to make sure that you're engaging with those different groups. And so there actually is a lot of customization that takes place, because that's part of the DNA of what you guys do, is making sure that, we need to make sure that, we're engaging all of these different parties, and they, because it's right on your website, the people know best what they need in their neighborhood. And so it is, there's commonality to it, but because of that, one of the core features to what you do is making sure that you are able to do that. We're looking at the national reach and all the different dots of the cities that you've worked in. Kyle, when you look back at this experience over these many years, you don't have to give any names of any cities here, but when they fail to launch, when they fail to be as successful as they had the aspirations in the very, very beginning, what's a key feature, that just wasn't in the mix, so that, hopefully other cities who are wanting to accelerate their mobility programs and initiatives and maybe future, cohorts that you guys work with, what's something they need to keep in the back of their mind that they don't do that? And I'm sure that's part of the learning and teachings that you now implement to the new cities, but what are some of the learnings that you've seen?
Yeah, and I think that's a great recognition, John, that there are cities, as much as we talk about the opportunity that exists, there are cities who aren't quite ready for a discussion around acceleration. And what we typically find is there's sort of like two key red flags that we look for in cities that are considering acceleration to understand whether or not they, it's a big spectrum, but there are two sort of things that sort of are warning signs for us. One is, where is the support of your highest elected official? That could be a mayor. It could be like a city council, depending on your form of government. I say mayor, but I sort of mean like whoever is in charge, has been elected to be in charge, and is making decisions about what's happening in your community. Their support, if we think about all the different people in the community who we want to have supportive, if I'm weighing sort of like where their support fits on the scale of like influence, theirs is just a little bit heavier than everyone else. And it's not that it's a prerequisite that you have a passionate elected official leading this work. There are plenty of examples. We know this from our experience of cities where that kind of support is a little apathetic or missing or even antagonistic, and you can still make progress. But as it's a really nice thing to have your mayor be really outspoken about their support for this work, and because they set the tone for everyone else around them, whether or not they're going to be hands-on engaged in drawing bicycle lanes on the map at the community meeting, or whether or not they're just going to internally tell city staff to go do this thing. They don't have to be sort of, gung-ho bicycling advocates where, they're leading a bicycle ride once a month. But their level of interest can really tip the scales on whether or not a city will be successful. And so we're always looking for evidence that your highest elected official is supportive, is outspoken. If they're not outspoken, if we can't find record of that support, in a newspaper article or an interview or in a plan, then we dig around a little bit to try to find out whether or not it's purposeful. Like, do they just hate bicycle lanes, or whether it's because they have other priorities and this is not the thing that sort of takes their time and attention. So that's number one. The second thing that we look for, and this is actually the bigger of the two, is we tend to we try to model sort of like community-based support into sort of three types of stakeholders. One of those that I just mentioned was elected officials. The second is like your city staff, right? It's your Department of Public Works or your Department of Transportation. It's the people tasked with actually delivering projects. And the third group are community supporters. And that's everybody from, your local chamber of commerce to your bicycling advocates to your housing advocates. It's your residents, it's your neighborhood groups. It's a really big umbrella. And so if you think about the metaphor here is like the three legs of a stool, right? You need three legs of a stool for a stool to sort of sit up and to support your, in this instance, an acceleration goal. You have to have at least two legs of the stool standing in tandem with each other. So I need my elected officials to be on the same page as the city staff. And if my community groups aren't quite there, if they're not quite sort of in the place where you want them to be, that's okay. We can still make progress because we've got two legs of the stool holding each other up. We might have a great city staff and really amazing community partners, right? Those two, they might be the two legs of the stool. Maybe your mayor and city council are not really talking about this. Again, that's okay because we got two legs of the stool. The red flag for us is when you only have one leg of the stool that's showing up to support this work. And that is an opportunity. That's a situation in which we say, this is not an acceleration progress. This is like how do we build support how do we get another leg of the stool to be on board? And so I know that there's a metaphor there, but I think it's really important to sort of think about that the situation is not who has the best bike plan, who has the biggest bank account to fund the work, who's building the most innovative types of infrastructure, who has the best engagement strategy, like all of that. At the end of the day, doesn't really matter, we found. It's really about how well do these groups know what's going on? How well are they able to support each other? And are they working together towards that common goal in lockstep with one another? And you really need two at a minimum to sort of make acceleration happen. The sweet spot, if you get all three, then you're really cooking with gas at that point.
I would just add like an example is one city where we had pretty supportive staff and we had community engagement, and the mayor was kind of meh, like she wasn't against it, but wasn't really for it. And we were able to really get her on board because the other two the city staff were able to kind of bolster them. And then we were able to really get those community organizations, individuals out in support to give her 100% props every time she came out for an activation event. She was in so many photos, like with the big scissors, cutting the ribbon on a new project. She was there with puppies and small children, at community events, showing her support. And it became in 2 years a difference from her being kind of like, it's fine, to actively running a reelection campaign as this is part of it, her support for their accelerated goal. And so to those who say our mayor isn't on board, if they are running on ripping out bike lanes, well, you probably have a problem. But if they are just not really engaged, there's opportunity there.
So what's new? What's in the future? What's going to happen in the future for City Thread?
So I'd say two things. Number one is that we're really thinking about how to use our approach for public infrastructure projects that are not based in mobility. We really believe in this approach. Everything that Kyle and I have described, you could think about how that might be applied to building more housing that's affordable and available for all people. You could think about how to increase access to healthcare, how to have better schools. So we've been thinking about this a while, and harking back to the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about how do you make sure that bureaucracy and red tape doesn't get in the way of cities delivering the things that people want and need. There's a lot of things that people want and need. And so we're starting to dip our toe into how can we use this approach, this playbook, not just for mobility projects, but for other kinds of projects in communities. And so we're working with some partners in public health and funding organizations in a particular part of the country to kind of go and see, go back a step from what are the barriers to you and accelerating on a mobility goal, but what are the issues that are most affecting the people in your community? What do they want? If we're going to inject an ambitious goal, if we're going to inject some money and some really key partnership into achieving something, what should that look like? And asking the community members, through polling, through focus groups, through conversations, what do you want that to be? What's the number one issue affecting you? And then hopefully, using our playbook to help deliver on those. So number one is, let's use the playbook for more than just mobility. And I'd say the second thing is that, we have a city where they are wrapping up their achievement of their 3-year implementation goal. They were on pace when we started with them of building maybe 1 mile to 1.5 miles of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure every year. And we, at the end of this year, will have helped using the playbook for them to have built 30 miles in 3 years. So we're really excited about that. And so that's the story that we're going to be telling at the end of the year is how did that happen and how could it happen for you?
Is that the special announcement that's supposed to be coming up in November?
Yeah, I know. I wasn't really, I probably didn't give you enough hints there on where this is, but yeah, that is just kind of, sharing that this actually happens in a place that people don't think of as the mobility. It's not Portland, Oregon. It's not Davis, California. It's some place that you don't expect there to be a lot of investment and support for this kind of infrastructure. And yet the city set the goal and the city will meet it. And we'll be telling that story. I don't know, Kyle, are we supposed to say any more than that, or is that enough?
We'd have to ask Sarah for sure, but you can look at that map, John, and you can dream about which dot on the map it actually is.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. Kyle, what would you add, to this, sort of looking forward? What's next with for City Thread?
I mean, I think Zoe hit it. We're really excited about taking what we have learned from mobility-based projects and applying them to other kinds of projects that people are trying to get across the finish line in their city. Because this sentiment around that it's taking too long to get the things that people want delivered in cities exists if you're passionate about community gardens or parks or streets or whatever it actually is. That sentiment, it exists, and I think if you turn on any kind of political podcast today where we're talking about sort of, where we're at, they're having this discourse already. And what I'm really excited about is that City Thread, we've kind of known this for a number of years. We've actually have tactical, solutions for communities to sort of not just identify what the problems are, but also to take action on them. And I feel really excited about, this opportunity to broaden our coalitions that we know eventually will they're also supportive of mobility projects, but to broaden our reach into communities and help sort of, think about the bigger problems that exist in communities every day. Like there's not a city that we work in, John, where housing is not the number one issue. Like it's almost silly at this point to continue surveying people and doing focus groups because housing is number one. It's like the other free bingo space on the bingo card. Transportation is always number 2 or 3. There are, again, these similar challenges that exist in communities. And what I'm really excited about is that where City Thread fits into all of this is that we've got the playbook, we've got a strategy, and we don't have to sort of continue to sort of wonder, how we're going to get out of these situations or how we're going to address them. And, I think after a long career of asking those kinds of questions, coming all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, why did it take 10 years for this great project to get built? I feel really, really proud and also, really grateful that we can now walk into communities and say, hey, I think we've got a solution that we can actually get you across the finish line. And we can do that. For us, it's also about accelerating our own work, right? It's like helping communities accelerate and helping us accelerate that into community.
Fantastic. We're looking once again at the website here. This gives folks the ability to contact the organization. So folks head on over to citythread.org for more information and to reach out and see if there might be an opportunity to work together. Zoe, did we miss anything? Any final things that you want to hit as we scroll down the website here?
I think we hit just about everything. I just say that we are excited to be working in a number of cities, and I'll make a little plug for Cleveland because I'm going to Cleveland next week, and really excited to see their Mayor Bibb, make a commitment to building 50 miles of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure by the end of 2027, launching the Cleveland Streets Coalition in support of that work. And so I'm just going to give a little plug to my friends in Cleveland. Super excited to be working there with them.
Final thoughts from you, Kyle?
I would just say, no matter, I'm talking to sort of like the Kyle of 20 years ago, right? Who was sitting in a bicycle shop wondering why we can't have nice things in Memphis. And I would just say, we've been there. We know what you're going through, and it doesn't have to be that way. And we can do all of this. We don't have to become experts at building bicycle lanes. We don't have to be experts at planning. Really what we have to do is have a commitment to people, have a commitment to building relationships with people. And that will take us much, much further than, getting an engineering license and trying to sort of figure out a better way to, manage the implementation. And so for anyone who is sitting in their own proverbial basement wondering why we can't have nice things, I would say reach out to Zoe or I or to Sarah on the City Thread website and let us know how we can help.
Fantastic. Zoe, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, John. We're gonna catch up to Van Duzer at some point. I feel it's coming.
Hey, thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on the subscription button down below and ring that notifications bell. And again, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Super easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org, click on that support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including making a contribution to the nonprofit. You can buy me a coffee, as well as becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons do get early and ad-free access to all the video content. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, just want to send a huge thank you to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel financially via YouTube memberships, YouTube super thanks, as well as making contributions to the nonprofit and joining my Patreon. Every little bit adds up and is very much appreciated. Thank you all so much.